So we're diving into a pretty intense year for the Nephites, a year full of conflict from inside their community and from outside forces too. We're looking at the Book of Alma, chapter 51 specifically. It's a year that really puts their faith and leadership, well, to the test.
Yeah, it's interesting how this chapter starts, It's the 25th year of the judges, their system to keep things free and righteous. But then Alma 51.2 says they did not long maintain an entire peace in the land.
You think after 25 years, things would be settled, right? What happened?
A big debate starts about changing the law. Alma 51.5 even says some folks did stir up the people to anger against the government. It wasn't just about legal stuff, though.
Nope.
It became a deeper struggle between the people who wanted power
I see.
and those who wanted freedom.
So two sides formed.
Exactly. The kingmen who wanted a king, they thought a king would make things stable and strong, even if it meant losing some freedom.
Interesting.
A lot of them came from important families. Alma 51.8 mentions that, and they felt like they were losing power.
Makes sense.
Then you had the freemen. They wanted to keep their rights and their religious freedom with a free government. It even says that in Alma 51.6.
Okay, so this is like a classic power struggle. We see it even now, in different ways, I mean.
Oh, totally. That tension between being free and having a strong government, it's always there. Societies are always trying to find that balance. And, well, usually it causes conflict.
So how'd the Nephites resolve it? Did they find that balance?
Well, Alma 51.7 tells us they settled by the voice of the people.
Okay.
It didn't seem to get violent, at least. The freemen won, Pahoran stayed the chief judge, and for a little while, there was peace.
But we all know peace never lasts forever, especially not in the Book of Mormon.
You're telling me. As soon as things calm down inside, a threat pops up from outside, and it's the Lamanites, led by, this guy Amalickiah. He wanted revenge. Alma 51.9 even says how Amalickiah had gathered together a numerous host of the Lamanites and came into the land of Nephi.
Oh man, talk about bad timing. So now they've got division at home and a Lamanite invasion.
Yeah, it was the worst time for it. And Amalickiah, he had a personal grudge against Moroni, the Nephite leader. He saw this division as a chance to attack. It's like that saying, a house divided against itself cannot stand.
Right.
And get this, some Nephites, still mad about that whole kingmen-freemen thing, they wouldn't even defend their nation. Alma 51.13 straight up says, many had become hardened, insomuch that they would not hearken unto the words of the governor, neither of the chief judge.
I bet Moroni was frustrated, trying to bring everyone together while also fighting off, an enemy.
Put yourself in his shoes. Moroni, known for his strength, how dedicated he was to his people and his faith. Now he had to deal with people refusing to fight while getting ready for a war. Alma 51.14 even says he was exceedingly wroth because of their stubbornness.
Yeah, I can see why. It's a tough spot, balancing mercy and justice, while also trying to protect everyone from threats both inside and out. So what'd he do?
He acted decisively, but it wasn't easy. Alma 51.1516 tells us he sent a petition to Pahoran, the chief judge. He asked for the power to make these dissenters defend their nation.
So it was like, fight for your country or face the consequences.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's a big decision for any leader, especially in wartime. It shows how complex leadership is. You have to be merciful, but you also got to protect everyone. And remember, this wasn't about silencing different opinions. It was about survival.
I get it. Every choice they made had huge consequences. What happened next?
Well, Moroni got the power he asked for, but he didn't abuse it. He gave those who wouldn't fight a chance to change their minds. Like in Alma 51.16, he says, behold, I give you the choice. You may go to the land of Zarahemla and assist in the defense of your brethren, or you may go to the land of Melech and join those dissenters and be bound under a covenant that you will not return to harass the people of Nephi.
So he's saying, look, you have options if you really don't believe in this, but your choices have consequences.
Right. It wasn't about blind obedience. It was about understanding how serious things were. A divided nation can't stand, especially not against a strong enemy.
And that idea of unity, it's still important today. We see how division and fighting weakens us, makes us vulnerable.
Exactly. This isn't just an old story. It teaches us about standing together, especially when things are rough.
So Moroni's dealing with this infighting. But what about Amalickiah and his army? They're not just waiting around, right?
Oh, no. Amalickiah was a smart, military leader, but smart. He saw the Nephites were messed up and took his chance to attack. Alma 51.2227 show us how he used clever tactics, focusing on taking cities along the seashore.
That's smart. Control the coast, you cut off supplies, you get resources. He was playing it smart.
Exactly. Amalickiah was thinking long term. He knew if he could weaken and demoralize the Nephites, it'd be easier to beat them later.
So the Nephites are fighting a war on two fronts, rebellion inside and a strategic attack from the outside. What happens next? How do they handle this mess?
We'll have to get into that next time. So last time we left the Nephites in a pretty tough spot. Threats inside and outside. How do they overcome that?
Right. It's got to feel overwhelming to be surrounded by enemies, you know?
Yeah.
But the scriptures show us that, even in the darkest times, there are individuals who rise up. And one of those is the Nephite commander,
Teancum. Oh, yeah. He's a great example of courage and strategic thinking. He didn't just react to stuff. He planned ahead. Alma 51.30 even mentions he knew about Amalickiah's movements. It says, Teancum had received information that the armies of Amalickiah were marching towards the land of Bountiful, which was upon the northward of the land of Zarahemla. Teancum intercepted Amalickiah's army before they could get further, shows his skill as a military leader. He was a hero.
It's inspiring to read about someone like Teancum. He wasn't just a warrior, he really cared about his people. It reminds me of what Moroni said in Alma 46.1 was, I seek not for power, but to pull it down. I seek not for the honor of the world, but for the glory of my God and the freedom and welfare of my country.
I see what you mean. Both Moroni and Teancum, they put their lives on the line for their people. They understood what real leadership meant. Sacrifice. And speaking of putting your life on the line, Teancum's most daring act was still to come. He went right into Amalickiah's camp and took him out, like something from a movie.
It's one of the most exciting stories. Imagine it. Teancum and just his servant sneaking into the enemy camp at night, knowing they'd be killed if caught. Talk about brave. Alma 51.33334, lay it all out.
He was so brave. It shows that taking initiative. It matters. He didn't wait for orders or backup. He did what had to be done. Risk everything to save his people.
His story. It makes you think. We might not face armies or lead soldiers into battle, but we all have chances to be brave, to act on what we believe in.
I agree. Teancum shows us that even when things seem impossible, when all hope seems lost, we can still make a difference.
But even though Amalickiah was gone, the war wasn't over. The Lamanites kept fighting. The Nephites had to keep fighting for their freedom.
You're right. It went on, back and forth. A reminder that freedom isn't free. It takes constant work, a willingness to defend it from those who would take it away.
Thinking about Amalickiah for a second, he was, well, complex, driven by ambition and hatred. Alma 51.9 even says he had sworn to drink the blood of Moroni.
That's a lot of anger. Where does that even come from?
The scriptures don't give us all the details, but we know he was a Nephite who disagreed and ended up leading the Lamanites. He might have felt betrayed by his own people, even by Moroni specifically.
So his hatred came from feeling like he was wronged. Maybe it was real, maybe it wasn't. But it pushed him to destroy everything Moroni represented.
It's sad. It shows how ambition and resentment, if you let them control you, can lead you down a bad path. Amalickiah, he had the skills to be a good leader, but he used them to hurt people.
It reminds us, we have to be careful. We can't let bitterness and resentment take over. Those feelings, they mess up our judgment, and we can end up hurting ourselves and others. Absolutely, forgiving people who hurt us, letting go of anger, that's so important. For our spiritual well-being, it lets us make good choices based on righteousness and love, like Moroni and Teancum did.
So we've seen how this 1 year in Nephite history, it was full of challenges and heroes. What can we learn from their experiences to help us in our own lives,
One big takeaway is the power of unity. When the Nephites were united, working together, they could overcome anything, it seemed like. But when they were divided, when they were fighting among themselves, that's when they became weak. That's when their enemies could hurt them.
It really shows how important community is. Standing together with people who share our values, working to build a society. That's strong and resilient, no matter what happens.
Another thing we can learn is about faith. Even though they faced betrayal, war, loss, people like Moroni and Teancum, they never lost their faith in God. They found strength in their covenants, their belief for something bigger than themselves.
Their example shows us that even in the darkest moments, when we feel alone, overwhelmed, our faith can keep us going, give us hope, courage, and strength to keep going.
Their stories tell us we're not alone in our struggles. We have our families, our communities. And most importantly, Heavenly Father. He will always be there to guide us, support us, just like he was there for the Nephites.
This has been insightful. We've seen how this chapter in the Book of Alma, old battles in politics, still has things to teach us. But unity, faith, leadership, just as relevant today as they were back then. But there's more to discuss. We're not done yet. So we've seen all these challenges, the Nephites' courage, how important leadership was. But there's something else we haven't talked about. Their faith. How did that affect their choices, what they did?
It's a huge part of this whole story. The Nephites weren't just fighting for land or power. They were fighting for their freedom to worship God the way they believed. You see it all through the Book of Mormon. Alma 43.45, for example, it sums it up. They were all fighting for their liberty and for their lives and for their wives and for their children and for their rights of worship and their church.
So it wasn't just like a personal thing. Their faith was everything, their whole society. It makes sense that they'd fight so hard to protect it.
Exactly, and that's what kept them going, even when things were bad. Look at Moroni. He never gave up on God or his people. Alma 60.11 shows us how much he relied on his faith, especially when things were tough. Behold, I say unto you, the Lord our God has sent his holy prophets among us to declare these things to us. But there are many that have rejected them. But the Lord has chosen me and my few men to deliver this people, and he has made it known unto me by his Holy Spirit.
He was frustrated sometimes. With his own people, he faced impossible odds. But Moroni never lost sight of his faith. And that faith is what made him such a strong leader.
It's a powerful lesson. For us, we all face challenges, right? Times we want to give up. Moroni shows us that faith. It can get us through those times. It gives us strength to keep going, to do what's right, even when it's really hard.
And those who dissented, the ones who wouldn't fight. It seems crazy, considering how important their faith was. Why do you think they did that?
People are complicated. Even when you believe the same things, you can still disagree, have different levels of commitment. Maybe some were scared, maybe some were angry or resentful. Maybe they felt like their problems were bigger than the group's problem.
It makes you think. Even people of faith. They struggle, they make choices we don't understand, and we have to. We have to be compassionate, understanding.
For sure. We're all on this journey of faith, and no one's perfect. It's not about judging, it's about trying to live what we believe. To be strong and help others, like Moroni did.
Looking back at this year for the Nephites, you can see their faith was so important in their struggles and their victories. It shaped how they saw the world, why they did things. It reminds us that faith isn't just about believing, it's about doing something because of what you believe, even when it's hard.
That's what I take away from this. It's a message of hope and resilience. No matter what we face, no matter how tough things get, our faith can be like an anchor. It can give us strength, guide us. It can help us stand up for what we believe, defend our freedoms, and make the world better for ourselves and for the future.
This has been great. Really interesting to look at Alma chapter 51, a story about battles and politics, sure, with lessons for us today about unity and faith and leadership. And for those listening, we encourage you to check out this chapter, see what you find, where you'll feel that same strength, that inspiration from the Nephite story. And thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe for more discussions like this one.